Ludlow has been proposed before in 2016, excuse me. It was put on the ballot for a vote. It was defeated, I want to say 349 to 320 at that point. So one, I've said as one of, when I came into my position here in the town of Ludlow, one thing that was brought to me, there were two things immediately, and then the flood happened. That was a merger of the town and the village, which we are working on, and the local options tax to revisit these. So pushing 10 years later, we are revisiting that. I've put together just a few, these slides are more for talking points with some information about them. This is kind of more meant to be a community dialogue to answer. This committee here, Noah Schmidt, Julie Nicole, Gene Strawn, George Tucker, was the committee that, and we're missing Ryan Silvestri. Ryan was out with a previous engagement, was a committee that was put together probably just about a year ago to discuss what an options tax would look like here in Ludlow, what the benefits, if any, to the town would be, what the positives, the negatives, and everything in between. We had a previous forum on, I want to say it was the 23rd of October, and we had, a fair turnout and some good discussion, and have decided that since to continue to kind of push through it. If you have your town report, it is on the town report. It's listed as Article 3, I believe. So that will be up for vote on Tuesday. So, and again, this will be discussed again at town meeting, Monday night, 7 o'clock. Please come out. Most exciting time of the year, most nerve-wracking time of the year for me. I've already started being nauseous about it already. And that's not, I'm serious about that. So the local options tax, again, what exactly it is, if you're not familiar, local options tax is a 1% tax that is levied by the town by state statute on already sales taxes and business taxes in the town, 1%. The town, by letter of the way we have it on our warning, it is not a tax that is going to go into the general fund, used at the discretion of myself, or anything. This is purely for capital and infrastructure projects. We have a lot of projects that are coming down the pipe here that are going to face the town with some serious financial burden. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's a way to offset the burden. And I'll use the term inevitable burden with some of these things that will help the community and help to offset some of those costs as best we can. I'm really, unfortunately, with my job, and I look at the select board, I bring up a lot of problems, as it goes through. I have a lot of problems, everything is like, guess what, guys, here we go. But I also like to bring solutions with those problems. There are some problems that are coming that are just natural. They happen in every town. But this, I feel, is one way that I can come to it and say, yes, this is a way to offset some of that. And if members, feel free to chime in. If anyone has a question while I'm talking, rambling, just put your hand up, please. So how is it taxed? This is a breakdown of exactly how the options tax is calculated. It's 1% on sales tax, meals, alcohol, and rooms. So you see how that breaks down. It's normal sales tax in the state of Vermont is 6%. An options tax, it would be 1% for the town, which is a 7% total. You have local meals or meals tax, same thing, 9% meals tax, total of 10%. Same for alcohol and rooms. There are, a lot of towns have taken different approaches at trying to break this up. How do you, because you can go and put it forward as a vote and you could have just a sales tax. You could have just a rooms tax. You could have just an alcohol and meals tax. Those are options. The way this board felt, and the select board as well, preparing this, is that the biggest benefit for the town, especially with the, we are a town that the population swells tremendously. So as, you know, a number of other, I'm just calling them destination towns, your Strattons, your Killingtons, your Stows, Mount Snows, they, you know, have some of the community that visits us on the weekends or the past week when it swells, help support the town and the community when they're not here. That's a real black and white of this purpose of this tax. So estimated, this is the calculation for estimated revenue for the town of Ludlow for 22 to 23. These are the numbers you had. So 1% tax. The town of Ludlow would have taken in $998,356.25 in sales tax. That's would have been the 1% tax if taxed across the board. The state takes 30% of that. We know that. That's kind of non-negotiable at this point. One thing I will say, if you follow the news at all, the state, it just came out in the last, call it week, that the state has a surplus of $13 million from the 30% that they take from the towns. There has been, again, a push to try and, you know, VLCT is pushing this, that, hey, if we have that surplus, why are the towns not keeping more of this? And I know, one last, you know, tax. Do we really want to add another tax to anyone? That's like the forbidden word, and I'm one of those people. But I guess part of the answer is no, you never want to tax on things unnecessarily. But also here, you know, a balance of almost $700,000 a year that we're leaving on the table essentially to help fund projects, major projects in this town, is something that needs to strongly be considered. I will say that I'm on the board, a number of boards that I somehow find myself on, weak moments. You know, I'm the board of directors for this and things like this. So one board I am on has representatives from Stratton, Stowe, Mount Snow, and they said, hey, Brent, what do you guys have for upcoming for town meeting? I said, well, you know, a couple of different things, and one of them is an options tax. And all three of them at the same time said, you don't have that in Ludlow? Like, are you serious? And I said, no. And one of them said, I'll be honest, it's almost a disservice to the town that you don't have it. And that's, again, that's not my point of view. That's somebody else. And again, when you're leaving, you know, $700,000 on the table for projects and, you know, things, it's something that, again, strongly needs to be looked at. Just a breakdown, we kind of broke this down from a standpoint of what I guess you would say the cost contribution would be for the average Ludlow resident, community member. This was all census numbers, so income, less taxes, 10% of your income in Ludlow, $4,000 if you spend that in Ludlow. 1% tax is going to cost you $40 extra a year. So again, we also were throwing out numbers. If you have $10,000 you spend a year in Ludlow, it's going to cost you $100 extra a year. Multiply that by the approximate number of residents. We took the average 1,300. Your contribution by Ludlow residents minus the 30% is $36,340 versus the contribution from our visitors, $662,509. I think some of that kind of speaks for itself in terms of where the revenue streams are coming from. So items, these are some questions that have gone along too. Items that are included and exempt in sales tax. There are a number of things that are, these are all going to be up on the website, and if you, my contact information, if you email me too, I can send you this so you can look through this a little bit at your own pace, but I'll quickly go here. That this is the page that has all of the exempt items for, and it doesn't come up. It would, trust me, I'm looking at it. I was doing so well too. So anyways, I will send this along, but these links are the items that are exempt and taxable. So for example, food products, beverages are all exempt in the state of Vermont, with the exception of soft drinks. If you go to Shaw's, your groceries, they're not taxed as part of the 1% tax. Clothing, variety of clothing is exempt, and also anything that is exempt from Vermont sales tax is exempt from the 1% tax. Over-the-counter drugs, prescription meds, vehicle purchases, sales of vehicles, real estate, all exempt. There's a variety of medical equipment that is exempt as well. And then the other link on this page is just to the Department of Taxes that shows the combination of towns that have this and when they instituted it. So towns in our area, your Manchester, Rutland City, Woodstock, Killington, all of those towns, there's a list and a breakdown of every town that has it and when they enacted it. And I've done my due diligence in talking to other town managers that work in towns that have this again, and it's, it is a benefit from a municipal, administrative side for the towns. Again, benefits for the community. These are just some of them, and kind of tried to get to the core of what this is. And again, we need to find a way. Here below this we have listed flood control dam rehab project. That's possibly a $10 million project to rehab our flood control dams here. Fire apparatus replacement. We'll touch on that. We have 2 fire trucks that are 27 to 30 years old that are on the docket to be replaced and voted on this year. Those trucks won't even be here for 4 to 5 years. That number is $3.6 million for those trucks. If you saw Chief Whalen's presentation, it's online, it details the breakdown. So we're looking at a bond payment for those trucks of probably about $200,000 a year. That's just a fraction of what the option tax would pay for. It'd pay for it right off the bat. And then, again, water and wastewater upgrades. This is our infrastructure, obviously in town, is aging to such a point that major breaks and problems are going to occur. That's just the natural progression of a town. Flood resiliency and mitigation projects. Some of you may be familiar with the river program that they've been talking about, BRIC grant, which involves flood mitigation for the town of Ludlow, which is going to incorporate some of the former timber inn site, the former Little League field, possibly the old mill at 18 Mill Street. And these projects are done to, essentially mitigate flooding, lower water levels in town. But these are grant-funded programs, which is fantastic. They're a $4 or $5 million program. For the grant that we're working on right now, the town share is $238,000 to do the project. It's a fantastic project, but I don't have $238,000 just laying around. And so from the municipal manager standpoint and, the members on the select board and community members, these are costs that unfortunately really are coming, one way or the other. That's really how I feel. And, this year for our budget, if you've looked at our budget's up 5.3%. It's just about $286,000 increase from last year. So the select board did a fantastic job this year of working on the budget, came down a full percent from last year. That's a difficult thing to do. You start getting into some of these projects that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. For example, if George and I were talking about this before the meeting, if the fire trucks are to pass, which hopefully they do, because it's what needed, that's $200,000 that already goes on top of the budget. So to flatline the budget next year, we have $70,000. That's nothing. That just means the budget's going up. So again, these are just some of the ways that and I'm going to kind of come back to what I said earlier, is that while I feel like my job brings problems to people, to the select board, et cetera, I do try to bring solutions. And this is the one that I'm sitting here looking at some of these projects that we have going, wow, that's going to be expensive. And every day that we wait, it gets more expensive. But how do we offset this without causing any more of a burden to you, is really what it comes down to. So, that's really the long and the short of what I have to say. I don't know, this is, the committee's here. That's my email and my cell phone. Leading up to town meeting, I'm usually here or within a stone's throw. You can usually hunt me down somewhere. But comments, questions, anything, it feels to me like this is, and I'm in a weird spot. Although I am not a resident of Ludlow, I think I spend more time here than I do at my own house. So, the options tax is going to have a personal effect on me as well. So I try to look at the positives and the negatives, and I'm struggling to see, to be honest with you, the balance here of really where a lot of the negatives are with an options tax for the town of Ludlow. And don't get me wrong, there are some, I've had conversations with business owners, because it will have an effect on some, but it's also, it's a roundabout way too, is the effect on the business. You go to a lot of towns, there's taxes and options taxes, sales taxes, but what's the change on your property tax as well? So, questions, comments, concerns? Anything? No?
Alice?
Initially, you spoke about it being rooms and meals, alcohol, and then you've gone on to speak about, has there been a final decision, will it be on the other items?
On the ballot is all 4 items.
All 4?
Yep, so rooms, meals, sales, and alcohol.
Okay, but not on the other items that you mentioned, books, for example.
No, so that, and Alice, so that list, there is a certain thing, like exempt items that just are not, so for example, your groceries, formal wear, boots, suspenders, bathing suits and caps. And this list, and we'll put this out on the website so you can see it. Underwear, steel-toed shoes, overshoes. I don't know what an overshoe is. Rubber pants, if you have a fashion for rubber pants, wedding apparel. So things like that are not, exempt over-the-counter medications, antacids, dental repair kits, aspirin, ibuprofen, pain relief. None of that is taxed.
So what are some examples, but you're not planning on taxing, never mind those that are exempt, how about things that are not exempt? Are you planning to put it on those things?
Yeah, so anything that has, by statute, anything that has a sales tax. So if you go to buy something that has a Vermont 6% sales tax, the 1% is on top of that. Yes. Yeah. There's no way to differentiate between items. It's black and white with that.
Where's the money coming? When you go to the last slide, I think it was where you're talking about the dam control and the sewer and, I forgot the other things.
Mm-hmm.
One of those, I think it was water, whatever you said was coming from the grant. I'm wondering where the grant's coming from. Is that from the state?
So the grant that we are working on, which is the flood, and a lot of these here, so with the exception of the fire apparatus, flood control, dam rehabilitation, that's a federal program. It is a grant funded, but still there's a cost share, that's $11 million. The water, wastewater, they usually have Clean Water Acts. Vermont Rural Water funds those grants. The other one, flood mitigation, is a BRIC grant, which is a state and federal grant. Again, we haven't been approved for that. We're working on it because if it goes through, Again, it's a $4.5 million project, which the town has a share of about 238,000.
My point in bringing up the grant thing is with all the federal funds and the cuts that are happening as they come down to the state, will those grants be available?
I wish I knew. And again, so the only thing that does is make things even more expensive. Yes.
Things down to taxes
Mm-hmm.
and definitely corruption.
Can you go back to the first slide again? So
This one or that one?
that one.
Mm-hmm.
So it says room tax, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, is that just hotel rooms? Is that condos for the weekend? And is there a way to get the VRBO stuff?
So that is in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
any Airbnb, VRBO, that's all rooms and meals tax. The state actually also passed a 3% short-term rental surcharge tax. So if you're the hotel, you're paying the 9% plus the 1%. If you are a Airbnb, VRBO, you're paying 12% plus that 1%.
So it does capture
Yep.
that piece of it.
Yep. Someone doing something off, on the side that aren't paying taxes anyways, that, it's not doing that. But any lodging establishment, whether it's short-term rental or hotel, has that rooms tax already.
Can I sneak in another one?
Sure.
So, what does Val think about this? Val Okemo?
We have not, I have not, let's put it this way, I have not had any pushback from Vale Okemo, have not had necessarily direct conversations. We haven't reached out or, I think that they're probably, I would guess it's not something they're enamored with. But again, that is part of supporting the town. This, realistically, when this comes down to it, it is part, and we have a very, very good working relationship with Okemo and the management. We communicate very, very closely. This is a benefit, again, because the money that we take in is only going to go towards our infrastructure and projects that are, in turn, are going to support their guests when they're in town. So it's kind of, in a way, one hand is washing the other, I would like to think. I mean, that's the positive spin I'm going to put on it right now. So,
I would think it helps their property tax, and they're also, they have this in Stowe.
yeah.
So,
And Mount Snow, I
Yeah,
believe.
and
And
so
so
they've-
two of their properties
yeah,
as
they've
well.
gone through it already.
So that might help the residents if they knew Val was okay with it.
Yeah, and I won't speak for Vale, but it would be, I think that it kind of is to Noah's point, it does have its positive effects as well. Andy?
Can you put back up the overview of the estimated costs and contributions? Okay, so I just want to understand how to read this.
Sure.
Without the tax, we would be, the total contribution by residents? I'm confused.
So,
The last three lines.
so just that, the way that's broken down, so the 52,000 is what the residents the residential contribution is before the money goes to the state. So that 36,000 is the 70% that the town keeps.
Okay. But regardless, the bottom line there
Mm-hmm.
is what we as residents would have to pay if we didn't pass this tax because we have these needs anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line there is not what we would have to pay. That's what the contribution from is.
I understand, but if we didn't get this contribution from others
Correct.
for our current budget needs, then
Es-
pretty
es-
much
Essentially,
we'd essentially be paying that instead having other people pay that.
yes,
Okay, thank you. We're all for this.
sure.
43 and
One question. You said short-term rentals, state legislature just passed, so it's 3%. Does that 3% go to the general fund in the state?
So they passed it last year. It went into effect August. I don't know where that money goes.
Okay, so the question is, it doesn't benefit us.
That 3%? No,
Not in the
not
direct.
specifically.
Not
no.
directly, as if, the 1% comes and Ula, who has a question as well, it gets has it in her account, so. Ula?
Yeah.
Ula, can you hear me?
He can hear you,
Yeah.
Can you turn your mic up?
Oh,
Your volume up?
you're not gonna be able to, can you hear on your computer? Can you turn your speaker volume up?
I just did.
Is it the TV volume?
I don't know. Ula, we're losing you. I can't hear you.
You can't hear?
Mm-mm.
I can hear.
What's her question? Okay, so I just turned it up. I just turned my volume up. So what Ula was saying is that it was just a point of clarification that when the funds are, the select board, once enacted, if enacted, the select board would set up a special fund that would be the 1% option tax funds, which then, when the funds were disseminated from the state, they would go to that fund. And then they would be spent under the direction of the select board by direction for what they were earmarked for, which is capital and infrastructure projects. Mr. Alden?
Question and then a couple comments. The other page here, approximate number of Ludlow residents, 1,300. Where did you get that number from? Are you,
That was the census in what, 2022?
you have 1,735 registered voters.
Mm-hmm.
So also so not everyone that's on the rolls is still alive, maybe have moved. So we kind of took a little bit off that to like account for worst case scenario of how many people actually live here to
Kind
give
of
an accurate.
Undershooting it is a better thing anyways.
Because
so.
if we had put 2,500, that would have been a less amount per resident. This, yeah, so this is like the worst case scenario. Yeah.
Just to make that clear, I think it takes 2 years to get off that list.
I believe so. So we did get a bump in population in 2020, and it's believed that we have had a reduction since then. So,
It makes, to me anyways, as someone who will be paying, unfortunately this 1%, it makes sense to me to capture that revenue from folks outside of the town. That seems like a no-brainer to me. But I guess my question in the discussion that we're having is if you know, the folks that have voted against it, the towns that voted against it, what was their basis for that? What was their theory of voting against it?
Some of the feedback that I have gotten was that previously it was not necessarily directed, the funding or the spending was not directed up to appropriate, or I'm not going to call it appropriate, but it wasn't specifically earmarked. It was essentially going to offset taxes or offset the tax rate. So it could have been used to, if we're in a deficit, we're going to use, a couple $100,000 here to offset that, et cetera. And people just weren't really comfortable with that, where I feel that, the way we have it, it's directed, we're telling you what it's going to be used for, and I don't think there's any debate over what it's going to be used for. It's things that we need. It's not that, well, hey, we decided to, upgrade the rec center, or, we're a couple $1,000s short on, highway paving, or things like that. Those are things that are, as far as I feel, those are things that are operational for a town that it kind of ebbs and flows, and one year you're up and because, you had a good year, and then this year comes and we can't get enough salt, so our budget is gone there. But that's what a lot of the direction I got was that people were uncomfortable just with that it was too broad of, hey, we're just going to get this 1% tax and it's at the discretion of the town manager to spend it, you know, as they felt over the course of the year.
It seems like, the revenue that comes from this from the visitors, as a visitor to other towns, the tax piece of it would never be a consideration that I would look at.
Mhm.
Knowing some of that. And, the folks that come in, let's face it, most of them, have some expendable funds.
Yeah.
It's an expensive sport. So, that's really the sell. Is getting 75, 80% of this from outside of the, right? It's passed through.
And I just want to mention, Eric, too, is with this being earmarked for capital infrastructure things, I think it's important for the select board trustees to, it doesn't mean you don't put into the capital funds in the general fund, and in 10 years, all of a sudden, we're in the same point where we're reliant on this, and, so it's still maintaining those things, we're still, putting into paving projects, all of that stuff. It's those big ticket items that are coming down the pike.
Can you put back up the benefits for the Ludlow community slide? And can you put an estimate on the combination of those four things that we need to do so that people can see what $662,000 a year can help pay for?
Yeah, I mean, over just the first two, even just the first two over the course of 10 years is conceivably $15 million. $10 million for the flood control dams, and we're looking at 3.6, excuse me, for the fire apparatus right now, which
And when's the next fire truck?
in the next fire is 3 years. And again, the problem with our, these two things with the fire trucks purchase and the options tax were done intentionally hand in hand because one, again, as I mentioned, problem, solution, is going to pay for it. Where, Chief Whalen did a tremendous job sourcing out and trying to find, explaining the cost of these fire trucks and the benefits of buying them together and up front, where the town saves almost $500,000. But the scary part is that if 3.6 for two of them, the reality of it being if we wait a year, it being 3.6 for one is very real. That's the scary part. So you have two projects that are with fire trucks, flood controls are $15 million in 10 years. And, as George pointed out, we estimated on the low end here, so we're on the low end at hopefully 700,000. That could be higher. So conceivably, you're putting away between $700,000 and $1 million a year. That's a pretty good portion of putting towards these projects.
I think it would be helpful if those projects have numbers.
We can put numbers on
Have
them.
the numbers of money coming in.
Sure.
But if we also show the money that's going out, that pretty much has to go out regardless of
Yeah.
this 1% tax.
And
To show the actual numerical savings to those of us, all of us, that have to pay it if we don't have that tax.
And one point that I touch on that I didn't put on here because it's a point of contention and makes my blood pressure go up, but it's in Ula was on, and I think she jumped off. But what we experienced with the flood in 2023, and I'm not even talking the damage side of things, but the lack of funding we received from FEMA and still haven't received from FEMA puts us in a position to really, it's a detriment to the town and to the community because we don't have funds. We are taking out $2 million loans that we are paying the interest back on. Hopefully we'll get reimbursed that interest. But those are things that to have this where all of a sudden we're not worried about, God, if this goes awry and we, right now we're still $2 million out with FEMA, but having this where we can say, yes, instead of taking a loan at a crazy interest rate from the bank, we do have these funds that can help restore our infrastructure during a crisis. That's just another piece that I didn't put on here, but it's another piece of this where, we talked about, we do have a, sorry, I have, okay, yeah. We had talked about that, sometimes we had taken, the select board had taken the route where they'd take some money from a surplus and offset the tax rate. That's been done in the past here. This year, because we were so low and we never had our FEMA funds, that wasn't even an option to provide our taxpayers. Wasn't even a consideration, because Ula and I would look at each other and say, geez, well, we made it this week, but it was tough. We're starting to see those FEMA funds come back in. But God forbid something else catastrophic happened where a major piece of equipment went down. We had a colossal wastewater break, something. Those things happen. Then we're looking at loans, bonds, that our hands are tied. But I can add those numbers, and I think you're correct in saying that would be a good thing.
Just make it clear, right? Those FEMA, they're trickling in.
They're trickling in,
They're trickling, very little.
dripping. So, and if you can use the mic so people can hear, I didn't get to that one. So if anybody has a question, you got to come up and use the mic. Patrick was texting me. I'm sorry.
So where'd the 1% come from? Why not 1.2 or 0.8 or 3?
State statute.
Oh, really?
Yep. Alice.
Just so we all know, and the people out there know, what is going to be excluded. Another point is, I had heard at the previous meeting that car sales are not included because there's some other kind of tax on those. I'm thinking about Benson's and car sales.
Car sales motor vehicle sales are not included per state statute.
Okay, so that's good for everybody
Yeah,
to know.
tractors, if you were to have a agricultural dealer in town, but, Benson's, that, again, car sales are not included.
Okay, so another one I'm wondering about that people will want to know is gasoline.
Gasoline is taxed, yes.
In this, it would be taxed in the local option.
Yes, because it is taxed by Vermont,
Okay.
it's taxed with the 6%, so,
And cigarettes and tobacco products?
yes.
Okay.
If this passes, when do you start collecting the 1%?
So the question is, if it passes, when do we collect the 1%? I believe by statute, we have to notify the state, and it begins within 90 days. So we have to notify the state, and that process begins.
So businesses are required to pay their taxes every month.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to the state. When do we get it back?
The time frame, I'm not 100% sure on the time. Is it 30 days, 90 days? I'm not 100% sure. I can get that answer.
I'm just curious whether we get it every month or we got to wait for a whole year.
No, I don't believe it's per year. I believe it comes in. It might be. I think it's quarterly. But I will. That's a very good question that I will double check on.
Feels so low today. I'm gonna step down here. Eric Alden, Trailside Road. I wanted to piggyback on Andy's thoughts about this, and I wonder if there's a formula or if it benefits or makes sense to break down tax-wise, property tax-wise, what it would cost folks to fund these projects. If we don't have this local options tax. You know, is it $400 more a year? Is it $30 more a year?
Well, those are some numbers, and I can definitely pull together, you know, for example, what the cost for the dams or the cost for the fire trucks would be to your, you know, what a $200,000 increase, just standard, would be to your property tax bill. Absolutely.
So just to piggyback off that, so this year, the 5.3% increase was how much? Was
268,000.
Okay, so just envision that if it was today, we had those bond payments, right? And each one of those bond payments was about our increase. Well, let's just call that be another 5%. So the dams would be another 5, fire trucks another 5. We're now at 15% budgetary increase, of which 10% we are locked in for the next 20 years, if not more. Looking at options, most of the projects that are falling underneath this program, like with the fire trucks, we're looking at using the bond program for the life of the apparatus. So we're not paying for that piece of equipment in 5 years or 7 years. The dam project, but we haven't really discussed, but I mean, the last time it was repaired was over 50 years ago, with the expectation that we will hopefully not have to do this again for at least another 50. So we hopefully can get a 20-year bond. So those would be scattered. I mean, we're looking at least, would be a 10% a minimum increase to the budget. I mean, and this is only a small fraction of potential projects. I mean, this doesn't include things like the Commonwealth culvert that's been on the radar that we haven't been able to get assisted funding with, along with many other projects. And to also piggyback off that, once we have a pool of money, we also have the ability to pay all at once for a project without having to take a bond or a loan, and we save that money that would normally go to interest, which is part of the way government works. You take a bond, you pay, what was it, 3% or so is with the fire trucks this year. Now, imagine if we'd had that ability to pay all upfront cash. Now, that might not always be the best bet. We might be able to be better off to take that bond, but we have that option once we have that money, where we currently don't sit in a position where we have the ability to pay that $2 million that FEMA owes us, et cetera.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
No. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And again, if, as I've said, you know, we've had a couple of these. We've talked at select board meetings. We'll talk again at town meeting, but I just encourage you, whether you support it or you don't, to be honest with you, talk to people, you know, encourage them to vote. Again, the options tax is, a lot of people hear tax and no way, but I think if they have someone that they know speaking to them, whether it's, you know, at the store, at a restaurant, talking to them, and it's not me up here talking, they'll listen a little bit more. So thank you all for coming. You know, spread the word. If you have any questions, again, this will be on the website, but my office is downstairs, email, phone, use it, spread the word. But again, thank you for coming. Have a wonderful night. Enjoy the snow.